Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, your favorite Giants podcast. I am your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike, the Cranky Fan, and it is a spooky Halloween night that we're recording this, in which the New York Jets still look like the New York Jets. They are dressed up as themselves.
They're dressed up as a pro football team.
Yeah, fooled us all.
All I know, Grump, is we were out at dinner tonight. I got back and saw the first half stats and everything, and I'm thinking, if Daniel Jones had Aaron Rodgers' stat line, it would be people burning down MetLife Stadium. And, he gets a pass because he's Aaron Rodgers, but he was just as awful as some of the things we've seen with Daniel Jones this year.
I think he had less than 40 passing yards in the first half.
Yeah.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah.
It still could happen. MetLife could burn to the ground tonight. There's a
God willing.
there's a no rain in this area for over 35 days ban on charcoal grilling outside the stadium and everywhere, I think, in New Jersey. So there is still a chance that the stadium goes down in flames and there's something smoldering in the parking lot right now. So there is always that.
I mean, it feels like the 4th of July instead of Halloween tonight.
Yeah, it's really weird. But our story is not about tonight. It is about Sunday at 1 o'clock. The Giants are hosting the Washington Commanders, and it is the second matchup. The Giants have already run through one division game per each team, or one game per division opponent. They are now on their second Commanders game. It feels like the season is... Does it feel like the season's flying by to you? It kind of is to me. You'd think that with a season like what we're having, it would be dragging, but it does kind of feel to me like we're just rifling through shit right now.
Yeah, I always feel the opposite. I feel like if we're out of it and we're just bad to watch, I don't get as excited about it, and the days just kind of fly by. Like usually, more engaged with everything and more willing to talk about it and more, but this, I just feel like we're just passing through time right now with this stupid team. So it's kind of, and then I compound it with having an almost equally irrelevant college team. I'm ready to put up the Christmas decorations and just say the hell with fall already. As it's 80 degrees out.
It's 80 degrees outside. Yeah. So I guess before we get into the game itself, one minor note. Let's talk about the Giants left tackle situation first, then we'll get into injuries, and then we'll get into this game, and then do a quick around the NFC East for this weekend. So the only thing I can really think of that happened this week, and I think it warrants discussion, is the Giants brought back Marcellus Johnson, offensive tackle. He was with the Giants in training camp and throughout the spring, I think. He's not very good, in my opinion.
That's why we cut him, and that's why he was available.
Yeah, and I understand that, but here's where my frustration lies, and this opinion's been voiced around the league. Not around the league, around the beat, I would say. I wouldn't say defended this regime, but I have. I've said that, they like the smell of their own farts in the 22-23 off season going into the 23 season, and rather than continue to build from the ground up and build their foundation, they went out and got weapons, etc. And then this year they had to, rectify their issues. And while they did get a very good starting 5 offensive line, they were unable to backfill the offensive line talent. And not that that's an excuse, but it's an understanding as to why we are where we are. It's my big issue is that this regime insisted on telling us all that Josh Ezeudu isn't tackle. They view him as a tackle. They see him as a tackle. I don't know why. I don't know if any other team around the league views him that way. I certainly don't think so now, but I mean, coming out of school, I know he played 4 positions on the offensive line in college, but their insistence on that led to them giving all of the backup tackle snaps to him through spring and summer. He got 1 week in Andrew Thomas's shoes, performed pretty badly, but so did the entire offensive line in that game, I might add. And then they benched him for a guy that they signed like 2 weeks prior off the 49ers practice squad. And now it appears they might be moving on from even that guy to a guy that had
Dumpster
to.
diving again. Yeah.
I mean, this is my frustration with, I guess I want to have a GM and a head coach that trusts their gut to some extent. But does this not feel like needlessly doubling down on something stupid? I mean, not at this point, but I mean, going back to not bringing in real competition for Josh Azudu.
Well, I don't know if it's doubling down because they gave him exactly 4 quarters for a plan that they felt very confident in for 9 months or
No,
10 months.
I mean, giving him all of the is doubling down, as in Josh Azudu was the left tackle playing when Daniel Jones busted up his neck.
Mm-hmm.
Joe Shane specifically cited that game as a game in which no quarterback could succeed in Hard Knocks, which theoretically was a candid moment or a unscripted moment. And then they did nothing to make the situation different in the summer.
I just think it was just a bad evaluation of Josh Azudu. I think they made the call that he's the guy, and he was going to get all the reps necessary once they determined it was him. And, we might have been in a worse situation if they were wishy-washy and was getting the necessary reps to prepare during the offseason and, leading up to him starting. I think they made a decision. They stuck their foot in the ground and got him as best prepared as they could.
Yeah, I guess so. I think also maybe it was just that they just didn't have the resources to dump, 3 offensive line free agency signings, not to mention the backup, center.
I think it's ultimately that's it.
Yeah,
I think
they
it's
just
like,
ran out of time and room.
they ran out of money, they ran out of time, and this is what I have. And
Okay.
I have to try to cook chicken salad and chicken shit. And I have chicken shit here. This is the less stinkiest of all the chicken shit I have. I need to get them ready. And I think it's something in telling that, they've seen him practice every snap. They evaluate every snap in practice. And they realized after one game that this couldn't go on, so they had to look outside the organization to find a replacement. That's telling to me of like, well, what were you looking at?
Right.
And if you saw, I mean, again, I don't know exactly how they do practices, but I'm sure at some point it was, he was lined up with the ones and it was 1 versus 1 or, even 2 versus 1 or something. They had to have seen something from that to make that leap from, well, he's holding his own to this is so unacceptable he doesn't get the second game.
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to know your thoughts on whether or not they just ran out of money or if they really truly view him that way and thought that this plan was going to work, or if they ran out of money and they were like, I hope Andrew Thomas doesn't get hurt.
I mean, I think that is a fart that they get for not making that priority more of, the swing tackle. And by the way, I don't know if you guys are, by the time you're listening to this show, there was one of the most amazing catches I've ever seen in this Giants game, in this Jet game. It's being reviewed, but it was pretty sick. So sorry to interrupt.
No, it's cool. Garrett Wilson had one earlier that was pretty sick too.
This was like sticking your head above your shoulder, like over your head, hand over your head, and doing the double tap with one, like the left foot. Pretty insane.
So you did the double tap with one foot?
Yeah.
Then it's not a catch.
Well, they just reversed it and called it a touchdown. We just talked about this, didn't we?
I thought that I don't have the game on right now.
Left touchdown. It was Wilson.
So he put the same foot hit twice. The other foot never hit?
He goes up, catches it with his back leg, taps and taps again, and then the shin goes down right before it was out of bounds. They reversed it. They said it was incomplete, did a replay, and called it a touchdown. Pretty amazing catch.
Oh, because of the shin.
Yeah.
Okay. Shin is 2 feet. Anyway, doesn't matter. Not important. Yeah. Let's go into the injuries for this week. So we mentioned Josh Azudu. He is limited this week. Not super important because I don't think he's starting, but I guess it's pretty important. The only real did not practice is still Jamie Gillen, who ironically was very active in the week 2 matchup with the Commanders.
Mhm.
Looks like Tyrone Tracy is progressing through the concussion protocol as of this moment. It looks like he's projected to be available for this game. I imagine Devin Singletary will get the start just out of injury
Yeah,
concern.
yeah.
We have 2 corners that are still hurt with Cordell Flott and Adoree Jackson. My biggest concern is that John Runyon is now limited. Um,
Well,
it, that interior of the Washington Commanders defensive line still kind of worries me kind of a lot.
let's go back. Let's go back a second and talk about the cornerbacks for a second. I gotta be convinced that what's his name is going to be on the field and not benched again. It almost feels like an injury situation.
Banks. Oh yeah, so let's
Yeah,
talk about Banks.
yeah.
Did we didn't really get anything more? Credit to Dan Duggan of the Beat. He pressed Dable for whether or not Banks was going to play, and he gave the same answer as last week. And Dan didn't let it go.
Hmm.
He was like, that's exactly what you said last week. And then Brian Dable had pretty much nothing to say. He's like, I think he's going to be past it this week, mentally.
We thought he was last week though too.
Yeah, I don't buy it. Do you buy it?
I don't buy it at all. I mean, I think whatever discipline's going on in the locker room and within the organization is happening. But if something, even the perception of something happens again, is the patience a lot thinner, and does he get even a quicker hook? And does that hook mean he's gone for an extended period of time? I'm treating this in my brain like this guy's questionable play for an injury. He's going to play, but it's a sore hamstring, and he might pop the hamstring. You may not see him for a while. That's how I'm trying to, rationalize this in my brain.
Um, I just I'm wondering if this is the moment that Brian Dable really puts his foot down as a disciplinarian for this team, um, and not just a guy who yells and screams. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it bears watching. I think it bears watching Deontay Banks' relationship with the coaching staff, all of them, because
It's
Brian Dable is not the only coach yelling at him. Jerome Henderson is on camera screaming at him for loafing in a game when he does not try to tackle somebody.
Yeah, but yelling at a player is almost like industry standard. It's like,
No, I know, but I mean,
you
like,
really got to do something. And you're right. This is definitely we're at a fork in the road part of the season right now, and the potential for losing your team not because they're tuning the coach out is because of like, well, this guy they all know. Dexter Lawrence even said about him. Deontay Banks said we can't do that. And if he's allowed to continue to keep doing that, that's when you're going to start seeing players check out and mutinies happen.
yeah,
So
I'm interested in seeing how the defense responds this week and how they conduct themselves because of comments like Brian Burns saying this team needs to grow up and Dexter Lawrence saying that they've addressed their issues. Um,
he could say it all he wants, but until
no,
we actually see it on the
right,
field.
exactly. That's why I want to see this.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily mean a win. It doesn't really mean a dominant performance, but it just means going out there and
Do your
not,
job.
yeah, it's just working.
Yeah.
Anything on Tyrone Tracy or John Runyon being hurt?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the Tracy thing is interesting because, he's not consistent enough to be like, oh my God, if he's not on the field, we're screwed. He's still a rookie, and we've seen a little up and down with him. Part of it is, the decision not to run the ball as much, but you know, he right now is the second most exciting player we have on this offense and the second most dynamic guy we have in this offense. And if he's not on the field, that's that hurts our chance to win. So you know, I don't want to oversell his importance, but I think it's important that he's back out there. And but also to say that he's a rookie, this season is slipping away. I wouldn't rush him back just to get him into this game. You know, so a lot of season left, still a rookie. We're talking about a guy's head. I just hope they do the right thing with him.
Yeah, I'm gonna default to my standard response on that. is that the concussion protocol is the only outlier in how injuries are handled. And if a player is cleared to play, they are cleared by a non team doctor. And therefore, if a coach is deciding to quote unquote ease him in or whatever, they are essentially healthy scratching. So just throwing that out there for everybody else. I don't know. It's not really something that needs like a huge discussion, but it's not like any other injury where it's just the team, kind of deciding whether or not he's a go. This is an independent doctor saying like, no, it's okay. He's no longer in the concussion protocol. He can do as much or as little as you want. So it's not you're not going back into the game with sort of a bum hamstring. You are fully cleared at that point.
Well, you may be fully clear, but you may not be fully brain unscrambled too.
What does that mean? According to
Well, I mean, it's
all of the
everything.
medical science we have, he is
I don't.
cleared.
Well, I don't think it's black and white that you're just because you're cleared, you're 100% normal.
Why?
I mean, because that's how every single injury is. Even if you have a sore hamstring, if you're cleared to play, doesn't mean it's still not a little sore. But I think they're just being overly protective with the head more than a hamstring or a knee.
I don't know. I don't know. I feel like there is no other injury that is so progressively monitored day to day. You can go backwards in that protocol. If you get cleared, you're essentially being healthy scratched at that point. I don't know. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with sitting them. It is entirely a coach being non-medical at that point and just precautionary, simply only precautionary at that point. But that doesn't mean that they won't do it. Like I said, I actually anticipate that they'll take the start away from him, and part of that has to do with the fact that A, he's a rookie, B, this offense isn't overly reliant on him making plays. Like, he's not the sole playmaker. This isn't Saquon Barkley in this offense for the last 4 years where there's no other playmakers. And this also, they have a pretty good tandem with Devin Singletary and Tyrone Tracy. There's no reason really to keep Tyrone Tracy above Devin Singletary in the depth chart at this moment. He is not head and shoulders better than him. They are pretty much equal. And I would actually say if you are prioritizing pass protection, Devin Singletary is probably the better option. So I actually anticipate that Tracy will get a smattering of snaps if he continues on this path.
And that's kind of a little bit to my point too, of like, he's cleared to play. He may not still be 100%, and they may just ease him into it. So yeah, I'm fine with that too.
Yeah. On the flip side of the ball, Washington is a little nicked up as well. But they are nicked up 3 guys who did not practice. I would say not necessarily key players, but they are not nobodies. It's not like an Andrew Thomas situation, but Frankie Louvu is questionable. He did not practice. Cleveland Farrell, questionable, did not practice. And, both of their left tackles, Brandon Coleman and Cornelius Lucas, I think are questionable as well. Cleveland Farrell, if you remember from the week 2 game, we'll get into this actual matchup, but Cleveland Farrell is the one who forced the fumble on Devin Singletary in that game,
right?
Which was a game-changing play. It was the only real turnover in that game. There was an interception on a 2-point conversion, which I think that was when the interception was. But other than that, it was really just the one fumble. So I think that you have a starting linebacker, both tackles, the starting left tackle and the backup left tackle injured, and your starting defensive end all injured, is significant for a team like the Washington Commanders that are trying to rebuild on the fly. They brought in a bunch of older veterans to fill out the depth chart. I don't know. Any thoughts on any of that? Do you smell any chances for the Giants' success in that?
Well, also the fact that Jayden Daniels played last week and he had injured his ribs before that, and there was a significant decrease in their offensive production, which may or may not be related to that too. So I think if you're adding all of these things in together, and we can we can get Jayden Daniels out of the comfort zone like we did the first time we played him, I think there is a shot to keep this game low scoring and give us a shot to potentially pull off an upset. So yeah, I think I think the injury situation and their relative health is, definitely one of our keys to success, unfortunately.
Yeah, so let's get into this matchup. We'll stay on the defensive side of the ball because Jayden Daniels is the most exciting, most talked about player on the field in this matchup, I would say. He is going against the team with the most sacks in the league, and they did a pretty good job of knocking him around in the first game in week 2.
Mm-hmm.
He's now playing with some hurt ribs. I don't really know the nature of it. It's not like it's a cracked rib, but it was a rib injury that kept him out of a game. I assume I'm gonna assume that it's bruised ribs.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think that was the designation.
And you have left tackle injuries. You have a center that's not very good. They have an offensive line that, in my opinion, is not very good. If I'm the GM of this team, that's probably the first thing that I am doing to help this team in the offseason is protect my franchise quarterback because, A, he had injury concerns due to his frame and just the nature of hits that he took at LSU coming into the – I mean, at this point –
and he's already hurt now.
Yeah, you have to teach him to protect himself, but you can't just do that. You have to protect him. You're going up against Brian Burns. I know Kayvon Thibodeau is still out, but Azeez Ojulari has 6 sacks in 5 games. Dexter Lawrence is leading the league in sacks. The Giants brought a lot of pressure. I think let's talk about Jayden Daniels here. What do you think the impact is going to be if you had to predict that kind of thing? What do you think?
Well, I think it's we talk about this off air that, it's just, it feels like two completely different teams since the first time they met. Once after week 2, they have scored 38 points, 42 points, 34 points, 23, 40, and then last week, after the injury, it dropped down to 18 points. So they put points on the board, and I think we even said it in the post game wrap up of of week 2 that it felt a little bit like the training wheels still might have been on Jayden Daniels, and I feel like watching him now, they're just letting him loose and letting him do his thing. The big thing to me is the ribs, and is he feeling 100%? Are the training wheels back on him a little bit because of that too? But he said he's the most exciting player on the field. He might be one of the most exciting players in the league right now, watching league wide. So I think it's just a question, and I think we'll know right away with him if we see kind of a quarterback with a governor on, they are trying to protect him more for the injury. If we see him, very active running around the pocket, trying to make plays, do Jayden Daniels things, he's free to do whatever, and then I'll be very worried.
I think that the Giants team definitely looks like a different team now than before. You figure the moment Andrew Thomas went down, everything, it's a cataclysmic change for this team. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say that they've at any point been good. I'm not going to make that claim. But going into that game, to get to the gist of what you're saying is it feels like two totally different teams at this point. The Giants had just come off of that Minnesota game where that might have been the worst they've looked all year, was that week 1 game. Mm-hmm. And I know that was week 1, but going into that game, I was like, holy shit, we'll never win a single game this season if we play like we did in week 1. We will not win a single game playing like that.
And then week 2, we gave a pass because, we screwed up the roster.
But and if week 2, I mean, I don't want to completely rehash an entire episode where we recap that game, but just as a recap, no kicker, and then also the Devin Singletary fumble is such a huge deal. The Giants' offense was moving the ball plenty fine against Washington in this game. Yeah. You also have a drop by Malik Neighbors on 4th down that was pretty crucial. They scored 3 touchdowns in that game. Does I know it's very Giants fan of us to wallow in ourselves, but It really does feel like it's been a while since we've scored 3 touchdowns in a game.
Well, it certainly hasn't been at home in recent memory, but
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And, I don't know. Um, I still, I think that Washington with Jayden Daniels, the training wheels are probably a little bit off. I think he's a little bit more comfortable just kind of slinging it. They still almost lost to the Bears last week. I mean, it just really comes down to a Hail Mary play. But Jayden Daniels is exciting, man. I mean, I've always really liked him. Um, I do think that some of his issues with the Giants game were training wheels and his second ever NFL game. I also think some of those issues are the Giants defense got to his face a lot and often. There were a lot of plays in that game. I mean, they outrushed the Giants statistically, but a lot of that was Jayden Daniels running for his life and escaping a sack. And escaping a sack. I don't mean design runs. I don't mean him being like an athletic freak. I
Rushed
mean,
out of the pocket and has to create something on his own to avoid
yeah,
getting.
exactly. And there were a lot of -12 plays that turned into +8 or 9. And not that that's a knock on Jayden Daniels. If anything, it's a positive. But will that continue to be replicated? Or will it get worse? I definitely.
And will he be as willing with the ribbish issue?
Well, that's the other thing too, is who's getting these sacks and how is he getting tackled? If Dexter Lawrence is getting pressure up the middle and just pancaking the Christ out of him, I don't know that he finishes this game
Could be.
With the hurt ribs. And it doesn't have to end in sacks. It just has to be quarterback hits. He can get rid of the ball, still get legally smacked around, and still not finish the game. So I'm closely monitoring that, and I think that is the biggest variable in this entire game. I think it's very predictable that Daniel Jones will not be anything more than adequate. I think it's very predictable that the Giants' offensive line will struggle to pass protect for him. But one thing that I think is unpredictable is how long into this game Jayden Daniels plays. It could be the whole game perfectly fine. He could torch us. Or, in the first quarter, he could go down with re-injuring the ribs from a quarterback hit.
Mm-hmm.
So I just don't know. I feel like offensively, Washington is kind of feeling themselves right now. They've got a little bit of the it factor. They're rolling. It feels a little bit like the 22 Giants. Except they have a franchise quarterback that's like a long term.
And more. Yeah, it didn't feel
but
like
in the
it feels like this could be the start of something big.
Yeah. I didn't think that the 22 Giants felt like it wouldn't be the start of, like, they had a new coach come in, a new GM come in, so it was possible that felt like the start of something big. But in the single season kind of grasp, it does feel like Washington is out kicking what they really are. And I predicted this going into the offseason, that Washington would get off to a hot start. I think that they would look really good, and as the season progressed, fall apart. We'll see if that turn ever happens, but I still believe it in my gut. I still feel like this is somewhat kind of just the darling era.
Fool's gold.
There's a lot of aging players on this roster, and aging players do not really make it through 17 games often. And there's not a lot of depth behind those aging players. So that's where I really think that the falling apart starts to happen, is the figuring out Jayden Daniels on one side of the ball and then aging players going down on the other side of the ball. So we're getting there. I do think that the offensive line does them no favors. The injuries on the offensive line does them no favors. Right now, my biggest concern on offense outside of Jayden Daniels is who is going to cover Terry McLaurin and not give up. Deonte Banks is my biggest X factor. I'm being serious. Like,
that's true. It's very true. Yeah.
I'm worried about coverage. I'm worried about Banks getting in his head, getting down on himself when things don't work, and just kind of mentally giving up. I don't even mean loafing. I just mean getting so down on yourself that you just feel like you can't do anything right. And,
we're getting to week 8 where it's just every single week he's He's been matched up against people that are better than him, and they're getting the best of him. And the frustration is growing and growing. You're right. At some point, you could hit a tipping point where you just break.
I want to flip to the other side of the ball with Giants on offense now. And here's
one quick thing before we go we flip sides. The one thing that kind of something just to keep in the back of your mind, and I get it that it was Carolina 2 weeks ago, but when Marcus Mariota had to come into that game, he was 18-23 for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it's not like we're going, potentially for, and I get it. It's the Panthers. It's not our defense. It's their defense. And it's a really, really bad team, but we're not going, they're not going to Drew Lock if Jayden Daniels does have to, come out because of injury or for whatever other reason too. So
yeah, sure, but Marcus Mariota is still probably quarterback 40. So he's still not like a starting caliber quarterback in my opinion.
I know, but I mean that's the same.
Drew Lock may be quarterback 80. So
right,
I mean, you're
but I think
not
that's
wrong.
also. But I also think that's kind of the product of also what's around him too.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. I guess I agree. He
Yeah, I'm just my point is that I don't think they're gonna go into this complete shell and do the Jake Fromm like we did on
no,
offense,
but I mean I'm also not suggesting that.
Yeah.
There is a significant drop off in what you need to do defensively going from Daniels to Mariota. I mean, I think you can be a little more buck wild in your pass rush lanes. I don't think you have to worry about the speed as much getting outside of the pocket. I think you don't have to worry nearly as much about the deep ball. But what you do have to worry about is him understanding things pre-snap, making the proper adjustments, and that kind of thing. So. And yeah, Carolina is really bad too. So I get what you're saying. We're not going completely off the deep end. You're going to a veteran. It's a different skill set entirely, but I think it's still a skill set that plays into the Giants' favor if it flips.
Yeah.
And from the beginning, you know what I mean? I said the same thing. I could see it from the fucking past into the future. I could see the Giants just failing to make the sack and Jayden Daniels escaping and getting like 60 yards off of it. That's just not happening with Marcus Mariota. If he gets out of the sack at all, he maybe makes it back to the
I'm not saying we're going to have zero drop off in productivity for them. I'm just saying that, again, very small sample size against a very bad team. It was business as usual.
Sure.
In that one event.
Flipping to the other side of the ball in the Giants offense, here's where I think that things will not be as bad as last week. And the reason I say that is simply because I think that this pass rush for Washington is more up the middle. And that's not necessarily a good thing, but it does mean that whoever is playing at left tackle, I'm going to assume Hubbard is going to keep getting the go, will be able to get more consistent help on that side or wherever their best pass rusher, which is probably, I don't know, I guess it's either Dorrance Armstrong or Dante Fowler. Wherever he lines up, they can just motion a tight end over there to make that work because we are not dealing with two really fast speed rushers like Pittsburgh had. And I think that's a huge deal. It allows Daniel Jones to hang in the pocket for a little bit longer, but it will not be as good as week 2 where he looked. Daniel Jones was good in that game, week 2. He and for what it's worth, he was not statistically too bad last week, even though he was getting drilled consistently in that game. I think that
gotta put the biscuit in the basket, though. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
With this team.
I still believe that this secondary is garbage for Washington. Malik Neighbors made them all look really silly in this matchup a couple weeks ago. I think Darius Slayton has hit a stride now, finally. He was mostly a non-factor in that game, week 2. Wandale is still Wandale. I actually feel like offensively it won't be as good as that last time. I'm not going to predict 3 touchdowns in this game, but I don't think it's going to be horrendous. I don't know. How do you feel on offense?
Until I can see that this offense is not horrendous, I'm going to assume this offense is horrendous.
Hang on. When have they been horrendous this season? Totally as an offense.
With respect to scoring points, because at the end of the day, it's about scoring points, and until I see this team actually consistently do anything in the red zone or score. I have no faith in this team all of a sudden starting to score a lot of points. I mean, it's as simple as
No,
that for me.
no. I mean, they scored 21 points in that week 2 matchup. So
Okay, with that, now
I'm
they don't,
predicting less than that. So
right, right, and now they don't have their left tackle, and they haven't even come close to scoring 21 since. That's what I'm saying. Until I see improvement, I'm not going to predict anything close to that going forward right now, and call that a breaking point for me. But I don't know. I mean, your points are all valid. I mean, maybe we do a little bit better job from 20 to 20, but again, I have to see it in the red zone. I have to see production, and until I actually see it actually happening, I don't believe it's going to happen.
the Giants have not come close to scoring 21 points since that game.
When was the last time they had 3 touchdowns in a game? When was the last time they came close?
Last time, so they had 18 points last week, which is close to 21 points. They had 2 weeks of awful garbage of 7 and 3, and then week 5 they had 29 against the Seahawks, and week 4, 15 is not close. And they had 21 in week 3.
Okay, so
it's 3 and 3. 3 times close, 3 times not close.
Okay, that's in the NFL. That's bad.
Sure, but I mean, I would not say that they have not come close since then.
Okay, fine. All right, Vince words. That's fine, but this is not a good offense.
Vince I can't choose your words
that doesn't score
you.
points consistently.
They don't score points consistently. That's definitely true. But I think that they score points against bad teams. They scored points against Cleveland, bad team. They scored points against Seattle, not a good team, and they scored points against Pittsburgh, bad team. And I Washington, by the record, is a good team, but my eye test says that they are a budding team still. Barely fair. Beating Chicago last week is not. I mean, it's a very exciting play, super great game to watch. Would not be running around my neighborhood with a "Commanders are back" banner.
Right, but I think you can make that. You can point out one game for every team in this league and say that was a turd. I mean, let's go through the rest of their schedule, what they've done against bad teams and against decent teams.
Well, I didn't think that they looked particularly good against the Giants, and specifically Jayden Daniels did not look good.
Yeah, I think this is a different. Up until the injury, it's been a completely different Jayden Daniels now. Up until the injury, and than it was in week 2.
Yeah, but I also. I don't think that that's a coincidence based on time. I think that the defense actually fooled him. That's what I'm saying. I think that he was struggling to know what to do with the ball post-snap. I think that's where his struggles are going to be for a little while, and I think that was Exhibit A in that. I don't think that a lot of that was due to training. I agree with you that there's no doubt in my mind that there's some level of training wheels that is slowly coming off for this team. Maybe it's completely off now. It could be. But in week 2, surely. But I do think that the biggest inhibitants to their offense looking good against the Giants in week 2 was Jayden Daniels struggling to read. And his athleticism bailed them out of a lot of stuff on the flip side. So I guess it's kind of a balanced scale there.
Yeah. And my only point is I think those training wheels might be somewhat put a little bit back on because he may not be 100% health-wise. And I think
could be,
and that'd be interesting to test to see about this coaching staff of how much they trust him, and if they're going to be overly protective of him, that could potentially cost them a game. I mean, if he is inhibited, and if that's self-imposed or he's still not 100% just the way he's playing, this game could get in the muck, and we could win a game like that because I think we could do just enough on defense to keep it close. Like,
I think in the muck is exactly what they should be aiming for too, right? I mean, this offense has found itself a consistent running game. I think the one thing that's been consistent this year for the offense has been their ability to run the ball. It hasn't always equaled wins. It hasn't always equaled exactly what you want outcome-wise. They've had their fumble issues, but running the ball has been the most consistent part of this offense, I would say.
And I'll go even a step further than that. I think we're coaching to that muckness because I think, we're going for it on 4th down more. We are trying to extend drives where, our best chance to win is to keep the ball out of other teams' hands. And it's not because we don't have a good defense, but I think it's just if we can grind down these other these other defenses, take the ball out of their hands, that's our shot to win. Give ourselves more chances. If we have a bad offense, giving them more opportunities, more chances to get into the red zone, more chance to now with a guy like Tracy and a guy like Neighbors to possibly hit the home run.
And that's where I want to go with this, because last week we saw, Brian Daboll has not shut up about explosive plays, and last week we saw at least 3 explosive plays through the air, 2 to Darius Slayton and 1 to Neighbors, I think.
Neighbors, yeah.
I'm sorry, and 1 to Theo Johnson.
Yeah, the tight end, yeah.
And that first one to Darius Slayton was not a catch and run. That was a bona fide deep ball, perfectly placed, perfectly caught, exactly the way you draw it up situation, and it was right away early in the game for the offense. While I think that they will be coaching to the muck, while I think that they should coach to the muck, do you think that they unleashed the explosive play that they did not in week 2? Or maybe not unleash, but connect on the explosive play that they did not in week 2?
I think they're going to try.
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, this kind of goes back to the health of Tracy. And I guess, Neighbors is 100% now. I know he's been cleared to play. He played, he's 100% at this point. I think if they're both on the field and they're both, feeling good, I think you'll see more attempts. I think now you have a couple of weapons, you can do those things.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, I think the secondary is garbage for Washington. I think that Brian Daboll is going to try to continue to do what he did against the Steelers, where if the defense is going to use additional guys to take away Malik Neighbors, then he's going to take the matchups where they are. And if the matchup is Mike Sanderstill and Darius Slayton, I think he's going to tell Daniel Jones to throw that ball.
I have it in my notes that my, unsung hero, bold prediction guy is Darius Slayton having a monster game.
So go ahead, give me your whole prediction.
Yeah, I think that, sometimes you try to over course correct is when you play a team twice a year. And, I am sure, Washington won that game, but I'm sure that coaching staff and that secondary had nightmares of every time Neighbors caught it like this and then cut to the outside and got extra yardage. And I think they're going to do everything in their possible to clamp him down. And I think that's where you're going to see opportunities for Slayton. And I think we are going to try to exploit and take shots. May not be successful every time. I think every time we're incomplete on a deep pass, you're going to hear a lot of boost in the crowd, but I don't think that's going to stop this coaching staff from not trying. And I think they're going to hit Slayton. I think in my bold prediction picks, I think he's going to have one big play for over 45 yards and a touchdown. And I think he's going to have a couple of other medium big plays. So he's going to have over 100 yards receiving. But I think the only way we're going to score is on a big chunky play like that. I think we're going to lose, but I think it will be mucky. And I think losing mucky is not the worst thing in the universe. Is these we're trying to play to our game, and if we just lose, we just lose. So give me a lower score than what Washington's been doing this year, closer to the Chicago score. Say Washington 21, Giants, and we'll throw them on a field goal too. 21-10, we lose.
I agree with almost everything you say. I think that the only chance that you're going to have to score is going to be on a big chunky play. I'm not sure that Darius Slayton is going to follow through. There might be like one big chunk play there. I think that Wan'Dale Robinson is going to have a pretty decent game. And I think that they're going to continue forcing things to Theo Johnson. I think that he'll have an impact play. But at the end of the day, I think that they're going to score on the ground.
Can we talk about Theo Johnson for 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
I know you've seen that. You have the opinion that we force a lot to Theo Johnson. Do you still feel like we're forcing things to him? You think he's more naturally embedded into the offense now?
I think that I think that they're forcing him into the offense, and they are just running their normal offense that involves tight end plays. That's what I mean. But I don't believe that he should be ahead of Daniel Bellinger on the depth chart.
Okay, I understand your distinction now because
Yeah.
I was thinking when you were saying that is like they're trying to force feed him a little bit more than he deserves, and I'm like, are they really? But the way you just said it like that
Well,
right, Bellinger. How many snaps did Bellinger have last week?
I don't know how many snaps he had. I'd have to pull that up, but
Not many. I mean, or targets, not many.
no targets definitely. And that's sort of, I do think it's a little hand in hand. Like they're Brian Dable is doing the play calling. He's also the head coach, so he makes the depth chart decisions. So
Mm-hmm.
he's putting Theo Johnson ahead of Daniel Bellinger, and all of a sudden, and a lot of the tight end isolation plays are, and I understand why, right? Like he's longer, so
Mm-hmm.
when you get isolation plays, you want to isolate your bigger guy. You know what I mean? It makes sense, but I don't know. It seems a little weird to me. He clearly is pretty raw, and we are just like hammering him up the depth chart when Daniel Bellinger may not be super exciting, but he's been pretty consistent since he's been here. And it's like never too high up, never too high down. I don't know. It seems weird to me. We're in a weird spot as a team to be kind of forcing people up the depth chart, in my
So
opinion.
I think you're answering the question I'm about to ask. And if you were the head coach, Daniel Bellinger would be ahead of him on the depth chart.
I don't know anymore. So I mean, like I
Okay.
could have seen maybe by week 9 or 10 at this point Theo Johnson earning his way to this spot. But most of when I was saying this stuff was week 3, week 4, where I was just like, I don't get it. I don't know why we're doing this. Like I get that you're excited about him. He's your guy. You picked him, but he doesn't look ready, and it's not like he had this huge body of work in college that you're
Mm-hmm.
basing it off of. Like it's a little bit projected. He may not even pan out. He should, but there's a reason he was in the 4th round.
Right.
So less so for me now, feeling that he's been forced. He's slowly. I mean, if you just look at the stats, you can see like the slow, steady incline. But regardless, I think that they're only really going to score on the ground. The Giants can't seem to score at MetLife. Daniel Jones can't seem to win at MetLife. This
Yeah.
team stinks. The stadium stinks. I think that we play a mucky game. I think that Washington is not nearly as good as they're easy to cheer for, and for most NFL fans, they don't pay attention to the NFC East. They certainly don't pay attention to Washington. Year after year after year. So it's very easy to just fall into that. The NFL has a down quarterback situation going on right now, and they are very excited to hype up Jayden Daniels. I still think overall this Washington Commanders team is not very good right now. There is definitely some hope for the future. I don't want to shit all over the franchise, but I think that they still win this game. I'm going to call it a mucky game where they score 2 touchdowns and a field goal, and we score 1 touchdown and several field goals, and it ends 17-16. We all board the train pissed off again.
Interesting. I mean, if they are in the same division as Minnesota and uh, you know, Detroit and even Chicago, which they had a Hail Mary win for, this team is not 6-2. And this team probably isn't making the playoffs either.
Lord, no, but I guess that's the best division in football right now, right? The
Right. Well,
NFC North.
I know, but we're talking about a team that's 6-2, and people are
Right.
getting a little ahead of their skis. Let's put it in the perspective of how good are they really? Like,
Yeah.
would you really, in an NFC Championship game, pick them to beat even San Francisco, even with the injuries they have now? I
I
wouldn't.
would not. No.
No, against Detroit, I would not.
No, I would not.
No,
Or
no.
even Green Bay for that
Or
matter.
even Green Bay. No, no.
Um All right, cool. Really, really cheery predictions. Let's go to the around the NFC East. Dallas is at Atlanta. I think that the Dallas collapses. We're watching it happen. We're watching the flames start to smolder, and I think Atlanta wins this game at home.
Yeah, me too. Dude, cue up the Michael Jackson eating the popcorn gif for me. Honestly, because yeah, that's kind of a sneaky tough place to play, Atlanta. We were there a few years back, and
Well, it feels like a basketball arena.
yeah, yeah, it doesn't feel like we're on planet Earth in there, kind of like Dallas is, but away teams do a lot better in Dallas than I think. Yeah, I think Atlanta wins as well, and the death march and the death watch continues for Mike McCarthy.
And then the Philadelphia Eagles are at home against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think again, it feels annoying to say this. Philadelphia, probably not a very good team. Definitely think there's some serious changes happening in the offseason, but they're absolutely going to win this game.
Yeah, I got a bad feeling they may have turned the corner a little bit too.
Eh,
I hope not, because I would have loved it, if we had, dual firings and dual death watches, in the division. But this is another get well game for Philly, and it's not going to happen this week unless, oh God, not God forbid, God willing that they lose this one too. But I don't think it's going to happen.
yeah.
No chance. Next to no chance.
I don't even know what the deal is in Jacksonville.
They're a collection of football players playing football on a Sunday. That's all I know.
Yeah. So we will be in attendance for this game on Sunday at 1:00 at MetLife. Um, I guess that's all there really is to say about that at this point.
I'll be blurry eyed, but I will be there. You know, it's like I said, it's rivalry weekend. It's Florida, Georgia, and it's Giants. Commanders. And as a fan base, I know we're a rough watch right now. You're very frustrated. You want change. You want all this, but try to cast all that aside on Sunday because we are playing one of our rivals, a division rival, a team we played, I don't know, 170 times in the last 90 years. We hate those fucks. Let's beat them. Let's, this season, the only personal enjoyment we're going to get are just, individual moments. And let's make one of these a moment by beating Washington and, pissing in their Cheerios right now because they're feeling themselves. I think you said earlier, they have their little it factor. Let's beat them and, go home on that train for once feeling happy.
All right. Well, then maybe we will have a victory podcast for you Tuesday morning on iTunes, SoundCloud, Spotify, and of course YouTube. But until then, go Giants.
Go Giants.